Welding shop in Hamilton gets a routine order from a U.S. buyer for fabricated steel parts. The quote is ready, the shipment is scheduled, and the numbers finally line up. Then a new notice arrives with the updated price terms. The tariff is doubled. The buyer pauses the order, and the owner is forced into the kind of decision that never shows up in political speeches: absorb the hit and watch margins disappear, or cut hours and protect the business. That single moment is the 2025 Canada-U.S. tariff war in miniature, not an abstract policy fight, but a real invoice that suddenly does not make sense. And for Canada, the stakes are massive. Every day, more than $25 billion in goods and services crosses this border. When that engine gets taxed and shaken, the shock moves quickly into jobs, prices, and growth. What actually started this? In early March 2025, the United States imposed broad tariffs on Canadian goods under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The rate was set at 25% on most Canadian imports. Energy and potash faced a 10% rate. The U.S. tied the move to border and fentanyl claims. Canada's federal government called the action unjustified and warned it would violate the CUSMA framework that both countries negotiated and signed. Ottawa responded immediately. Canada announced a 25% counter-tariff plan tied to up to $155 billion worth of U.S. imports. The first phase hit roughly $30 billion in goods starting March 4. The message was simple: if Washington taxes Canadian exports, Canada will tax U.S. imports. Why this fight is bigger than it looks. Canada is not a small side market for the U.S. Canada buys more U.S. goods than China, Japan, France, and the U.K. combined, according to Canadian government figures. Canada is also the largest export market for dozens of U.S. states. This relationship is not built on one product. It is built on supply chains. A vehicle can cross the border multiple times before it is finished. A tariff at one step can inflate cost at every step. That is why trade wars between Canada and the U.S. do not stay contained. They spread into both economies through the same industrial bloodstream. Then the conflict widened. On March 12, 2025, the United States imposed global 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. Canada was included. On June 4, the U.S. increased those tariffs to 50%. Canada is the largest supplier of aluminum to the U.S. and a major steel partner as well. So this move hit a core Canadian export engine. Ottawa responded with reciprocal measures. Canada imposed 25% tariffs on about $29.8 billion worth of U.S. goods linked to the metals dispute, including steel, aluminum, and a wider list of industrial and consumer products. This is where the story stops being a single policy fight and becomes a multi-front economic confrontation. Here is the twist most people miss. Not all Canadian exporters were fully using CUSMA preference rules. For years, many products have been entered under standard global tariff terms with very low rates. Now, if goods do not meet CUSMA rules of origin, or if paperwork is not filed correctly, they can get hit by these IEEPA tariffs. That creates a compliance shock on top of a price shock. Even though most trade lines can qualify under CUSMA, the burden shifts to firms to prove it. That means new legal costs, broker fees, supply chain restructuring, and delays. And for small and mid-sized exporters, that is not a minor annoyance. It is a survival expense. The August Escalation. By August 1, 2025, the U.S. escalated again. The IEEPA tariff increased to 35% on most Canadian goods. Energy and potash remained at 10%. CUSMA qualifying goods remained exempt if properly claimed. That single change raised the pressure on every exporter who operates in the gray zone between full compliance and legacy trading habits. Where Canadians feel it first. Tariffs are taxes, and when input costs rise, the bill moves through the supply chain until someone absorbs it. In Canada, the first pressure points are familiar because our industries are tightly linked to U.S. sourcing. Auto and parts makers often feel it early, especially where components can cross the border on tight schedules. Construction is next, because even modest increases in steel or aluminum can reshape budgets and delay timelines. Industrial equipment and other cross-border dependent categories face the same squeeze as firms rethink orders and pricing. What sharpens the impact is uncertainty. Even in a short disruption window, companies may delay orders or tighten risk controls because nobody wants to lock in a contract that could be undercut by the next tariff change. That hesitation becomes its own hidden cost, and it can ripple through hiring, investment, and consumer prices. The metal sector warned about immediate fallout from the 50% U.S. tariffs, including risks to steel, auto, and aerospace-related employment. Labor leaders publicly flagged the danger of rapid job losses if the U.S. market effectively closes for Canadian producers at those rates. This matters because Canada's industrial base is already under pressure from productivity shutdowns and global competition. A tariff shock does not hit a relaxed system. It hits a system already balancing on thin margins. Canada's approach in 2025 was calibrated. Hit the U.S. where pressure would be felt politically and economically. Keep the door open for negotiation. Offer a remission process to limit collateral damage for Canadian businesses that depend on specific U.S. inputs. This is a classic trade defense play. Retaliate enough to signal strength. Avoid a full scorched earth spiral that hurts your own supply chains. By late August, Canada signaled a major shift. Ottawa announced it would remove many counter-tariffs on most U.S. imports effective September 1, while keeping key measures tied to sensitive sectors like steel and aluminum. This was framed as recognition of U.S. moves that allowed most Canadian goods to enter the U.S. tariff-free under CUSMA compliance rules. In plain terms, Canada appeared to be trying to de-escalate the broad consumer-facing parts of the fight while holding the line on strategic industrial pressure. The core risk for Canada is not just higher prices. It is a lost investment. A firm deciding where to place its next plant or expansion will not gamble on a border that can be taxed at 25% one quarter and 35% the next. This is especially dangerous for auto and advanced manufacturing, where Canada competes with U.S. states offering incentives and faster approvals. A trade war turns that competition brutal. What this means for the average Canadian. For most households, this story will not appear as a clean line on a receipt called tariff. It will show up in quieter, more frustrating ways that build over time. A worker might notice overtime drying up at a plant that depends on cross-border parts. A small contractor might get a new quote for steel, aluminum, or imported fixtures and realize the price has jumped again, even before a single wall goes up. A family shopping for a vehicle or a major appliance may find fewer discounts, longer wait lines, and higher monthly payments as companies pass along rising costs and protect their margins. This is how trade conflict becomes a kitchen table issue. The pain often arises indirectly through slower hiring, cautious spending, and delayed investment, but the uncertainty is immediate. When people are unsure about job stability and future prices, they hold back. Confidence drops first, and the broader cost follows after. The Canada-U.S. relationship is too integrated to break cleanly. That is why these tariff cycles tend to end in adjusted rules, targeted exemptions, or political resets. The most realistic near-term outcomes look like this: more aggressive CUSMA compliance support for exporters, tighter origin documentation, a narrower sector-based negotiation focused on metals, autos, and critical supply chains, and a political calculation on both sides about how much economic damage is acceptable in exchange for domestic messaging. The 2025 Canada-U.S. tariff war is not a normal trade scuffle. It is a high-stakes stress test of the most important economic relationship in Canada's modern history. Canada can absorb some friction, but prolonged uncertainty turns friction into structural damage. When tariffs rise, factories pause. When factories pause, workers wait. And when workers wait, households cut back. If this fight continues to widen, the cost will not be measured only in billions of dollars of targeted goods. It will be measured in lost momentum in an economy that cannot afford to stall. If you want more Canada First stories that explain politics through real numbers and real consequences, like and subscribe. Because the next chapter of this trade war will not be written in slogans. It will be written in jobs, prices, and the decisions Canadian businesses make about where their future will be.